And hi, everybody out there in Ringo Klecko Sports Report fan land. My name is Timothy Connolly, and today we are joined by none other than Ringo Klecko. Say hello, Ringo Klecko.
Hello, music sports fans. It's Ringo Klecko, ready to rock and roll and score a whole bunch of home runs.
That's right. There's going to be all sorts of rock and roll here today. This is episode 5 of the Ringo Klecko Sports Report, and we're just going to dive right into it. No theme music for you today, you lucky listeners and viewers. Okay, right off the bat, we jump into some NFL news. Okay, now it is the off season, of course, in case you've been living under a rock and you had no idea. And of course, BleacherReport.com just recently threw up an article that said NFL teams that are failing their rebuild plans in 2023. And of course, this article goes right ahead and rolls out the teams that are failing. And it gives us 5 of them altogether. The first team that it gives us here it says the Green Bay Packers. Right off the bat, it says the Green Bay Packers deserve credit for getting a strong haul for Aaron Rodgers. They moved up 2 spots in the first round, and they added a 2023 second-round pick. They added a 2023 sixth-round pick and a 2024 second-round pick that will become a first-rounder if Aaron Rodgers plays 65% of the offensive snaps in 2023 for the legendary quarterback and a fifth rounder. Unfortunately, that's about the brightest aspect of Green Bay's rebuilding offseason. It furthermore goes on to say here that the Packers are starting over at quarterback with Jordan Love, but they have failed to surround him with proven talent. Green Bay parted with veterans Alan Lazard, Tanyan, Randall Cobb, and Jerron Reed while doing virtually nothing to replace them in free agency. Virtually nothing. Ringo Klecko, what do you make of this?
It's always important to restock the shelves, as they say, not only in the sports world, but in the music business, of course. Obviously, when we lost Stu Sutcliffe, we had to figure out who was going to play bass. John didn't want to do it. George didn't want to do it. And it came down to Paul. He got his Hofner violin bass. He played Stu's bass a couple of times, but he didn't plug it in. So if they don't have a quarterback to or the pieces to surround this Jordan Love guy because they traded Aaron Rodgers, well, then you're not going to get the same kind of syncopation in the rhythm section that you would if you had legitimate pieces around him. Obviously, if they can't pull out on the running game with the offensive line, well, then how are they going to be able to get hit record 17 number 1 signals in a row until the double A side of Penny Lane and Strawberry Fields Forever stopped at number 2?
They'll never pull it off, Ringo Klecko. Another team that the Bleacher Report article goes on to mention is the Los Angeles Rams. It says that they are not starting over at quarterback, and that's arguably the biggest issue with the rebuild that they began undertaking earlier in the offseason. That they began undertaking, I should say. The LA Rams parted with key contributors Leonard Floyd, Jalen Ramsey, Bobby Wagner, David Long Jr., Allen Robinson II, Ashawn Robinson, and Nick Scott in free agency or via the trade market. Tearing down the roster was a logical decision after the Rams' disappointing 5-12 campaign. Nobody would argue that, although General Manager Les Snead has been reluctant to admit that his team is rebuilding. Snead said, "We would almost have to somewhat tear it down to rebuild, because we do have a lot of really good players in their prime on this roster." Well, one of those quote-unquote good players is 35-year-old quarterback Matthew Stafford. He finished the year on injured reserve with a neck injury and a concussion, but he wasn't particularly effective before the injury, posting a 4-6 record and an 87.4 quarterback rating. Ringo Klecko, what do you have to say about this Matthew Stafford gentleman?
Well, Matthew Stafford, he's 35 years old in quarterback years. I don't think he's a young man. Certainly not old at this point. You've got these Ginkgo biloba hyped up players like Tom Brady and even the Aaron Rodgers you mentioned earlier. They're playing well into the 150s or 200s. That's metric for being old quarterback. But I know that Ringo is generally held to be the oldest Beatle. But obviously, we even had a an older Beatle than Ringo in the Beatle days before Ringo joined. That would be drummer Norman Chapman, who was in the band for a couple of weeks. He was born in 1938, so he was still subject to being the call-up for service 2 years for the Queen. All those born in 1940 and afterwards, they no longer had to do that. So the people we know in the Beatles didn't have to do it. But Norman was sent off to Africa to build huts. But he could have just died of old age before Ringo even joined, had he not been have to do national service.
That's incredible. I never even thought about that before. Are you sure about that with regards to being born before 1940?
Yes, I believe that is the case. There was, I believe, in the late 50s. That's when uh, Prime Minister Wilson's cabinet they decided in the Parliament that starting with people born in 1940 that they wouldn't have to do the national service.
I see. I wonder why that was. But we can discuss that another time. And now, just one of the other teams here that the Bleacher Report article mentions is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It goes on to say here that they did a fair amount of rebuilding following the retirement of quarterback Tom Brady, while general manager Jason Licht did retain players such as Jamil Dean, Anthony Nelson, and linebacker Levante David. He also watched several key contributors depart in free agency. Former Buccaneers standouts: Leonard Fournette, Donovan Smith, Raheem Nunez-Roches, Akeem Hicks, Cameron Brate, O.J. Howard, Sean Murphy-Bunting, and Scott Miller are now gone. At quarterback, the Bucs will have either 2021 second-round pick Kyle Trask or free agent addition Baker Mayfield. It's not the worst situation, as Tampa could find a long-term answer at quarterback if one of them emerges as a viable starter, although Baker Mayfield could depart in 2024 and Trask could depart in 2025. Interesting situation happening there. What do you make of all that Tampa Bay Buccaneers stuff, Ringo Klecko?
No, Baker Mayfield, he's a serviceable quarterback in the National Football League. In 2022, he was perhaps the best backup quarterback. But I think what was most notable about his play and his performance was the fact that he was a team player, perhaps for the first time in his career. Obviously, in Cleveland and in Carolina, they're all rumblings, most of them substantiated that he was not really the most prepared or willing teammate. But when he got to the LA Rams, he kept his nose clean and he did what he needed to do. And I think that when he gets the opportunity to be the starter, if he does down in Tampa, that he'll take advantage of it. I think the number one problem with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is that for the second year in a row, Bruce Arians is not the head coach and Todd Bowles is. Obviously, when they had Tom Brady and Bruce Arians for years 1 and 2, they won the Super Bowl and then they made it to the divisional round. Then you put in Tom Bowles with Tom Brady and they didn't go anywhere. So now they don't even have Tom Brady. I think as long as Todd Bowles is there, then they're not going to get a hit record. They're not going to be the biggest group of all time. They're not going to get millions of birds. Obviously, I think the big comparison would be when Pete Best was in the band, and it was really George who initiated getting him out of the band and getting Ringo in. And that was pretty much like in reverse of Bruce Arians and Todd Bowles. George Harrison, he was on record in many interviews, some in Playboy, some in Rolling Stone, and some in Mersey Beat, that Pete Best was the Todd Bowles of Liverpool drummers. And they really felt like Ringo, when they met him in Hamburg in 1960 with the Hurricanes, they said, that's our Bruce Arians. We got to get him as soon as possible. And they did.
It worked out wonderfully for them, too. Now, it also goes on to say here in this Bleacher Report article, just one final note before we move on to Major League Baseball news. It says that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers could win the NFC South again this season, but they're not going to challenge for a Super Bowl, and that would leave them without a shot at a blue chip quarterback prospect and with a very sticky financial situation next offseason. Well, that all seems like glass half empty stuff to me. I mean, who's to say, right? I mean, the Tampa Bay squad could remain relatively healthy throughout the course of the regular season, going into the postseason and into the playoffs and deep into the playoffs, perhaps even all the way to the Super Bowl. I'm not boldly predicting that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers will win the Super Bowl next season, but I am prepared to give them the benefit of the doubt when it comes to injuries. Now, every other team in the NFC South could very well be riddled and plagued with injuries. Of course, Ringo Klecko, you know how it goes when it comes to injuries. Every team is prone to them, and some teams, it's just by process of elimination, they turn out to be relatively healthier and significantly less injured than the other teams in their own division. So let's not count out the Tampa Bay Buccaneers here. They may not exactly be impressing the pants off of everybody during the offseason and with their free agency and whatnot, but we shall see what happens. And but now, of course, moving right along to the next big segment here on the Ringo Klecko Sports Report, it's time to take a look at what's happening in the Major League Baseball. Now, of course, with the All-Star game coming up right after this weekend, um, right after today, as a matter of fact, I think the Home Run Derby is getting ready to start soon, and the league announced the listing of players who are going to be competing in the Home Run Derby this year. And there are some surprises, and but of course also some familiar faces, including previous Home Run Derby champions. So here, Ringo Klecko, we have the 8 players who will be competing in the Home Run Derby this year. There is Luis Robert Jr., and we've got Adley Rutschman, and we've got Pete Alonso, and we've got Julio Rodriguez. We have Mookie Betts, we have Vladimir Guerrero Jr., Adolis Garcia, and Andy Arozarena. I love Randy's last name. And this article at MLB.com also goes on to give just a little bit of a rundown about each of the players who will be competing in this year's Home Run Derby. Now, the number 1 seed for the contest is Luis Robert Jr. from the Chicago White Sox. And he enters the top seed. He's already hit a ton of home runs this year. And of course, it goes on to say here that his longest home run of the year so far this season was a 450-foot bomb that he hit on July 4th against the Toronto Blue Jays. And I wish I had seen that. So he is going to be um, competing at the number 1 seed. And I think he already has 25 home runs, if I'm not mistaken, maybe more, on pace to hit 50, maybe more. And of course, the number 2 seed is Pete Alonso. Yes, the polar bear from Flushing in New York, where he plays for the New York Metropolitans. And Pete Alonso also was at the 25 home run mark. He may have more than 25 now at this point. I believe this was a few days ago when they announced who was going to be competing in the home run derby. But at any rate, Pete's longest home run of the season came against the Atlanta Braves on June 6th when he hit a 448-foot bomb. And let's see, it also goes on to say here in this article, interestingly enough, Pete Alonso is a home run derby superstar. He is a 2-time champion, winning back-to-back derbies in 2019 and 2021. There was no home run derby in 2020. You might recall this. It took a monster 31 home run round from Rodriguez to eliminate Alonso from last year's home run derby, and now they're set up for a must-watch first-round rematch. It also goes on to say here that Polar Bear Pete is the all-time leading home run derby slugger, and he's pulling away from the pack. Alonso has hit a total of 174 home runs in his 3 home run derbies. That ranks him number 1 by far in the history of the contest. Albert Pujols is second on that list with 106 home runs across 5 home run derbies. 174 across 3 for Pete Alonso. Impressive. He'll be looking to add to that total when the home run derby rolls around during this year's big home run derby contest. And of course, we are very excited for the All-Star festivities. How about you, Ringo Klecko? Are you excited for the Major League Baseball All-Star game and other festivities?
Well, I think one is either excited for the baseball home run derby and the associated festivities, or one's dead. Um, I'm trying to think of there's this Polar Bear Pete. I think that was the original lyrics to Polythene Pam, which John obviously wrote during the Get Back Let It Be sessions, and ended up on the Abbey Road medley. Would have been very different if have you seen Polar Bear Pete? He's so good looking, but he looks like a I don't know, a beet. How would you spell beet? I guess you got to spell it Beat. That would be another callback, another clue that Paul had a bad motorcycle accident in 1966 and was replaced by Billy Shears. Who was the name of that Luis Rojas Jr., the number one seed? Is that his name, mate?
The number one seed? Well, the number one seed for the home run derby this year is Luis Robert Jr. from the Chicago White Sox.
Louis Robert Jr. That's really good to hear because I think it was Louis Robert Sr. He was the pilot of a plane down in Manila in the Philippines after the Marcoses held us up for about 50 large in a brown paper bag that Mal Evans had to walk out in the tarmac and hand over. Yeah, they were going to take us all down and make us political prisoners.
Is
But
that right?
our pilot, the elder there, Luis the Elder, he got us away in between two really one crevice in between two big mountains there down in the Philippines. You can look it up on Google Maps. He did turn the plane sideways just as we were going over the lyrics for She Said, She Said. Yeah, what a guy. Happy for his son. Hope he wins. That would be gear.
It would be. I think most folks are expecting him to win. We've seen how the seeds are going to shake out. Luis Robert Jr. is going to square off in the first round against the number 8 seed. Of course, he's the number 1 seed, so he gets it easy right off the bat, right? And, well, we'll have to see what's going on here with all of this. Lots of cool teams represented in the Derby. We'll see who wins. And by the way, with regards to Polar Bear Pete, did anyone ever refer to Pete Best as Polar Bear Pete, or they never went there?
Well, Pete didn't talk very much. He was either hitting the skins or he'd go off and he'd get the best looking bar girls and go ahead and have relations with them out on a boat down in Hamburg. He was dating a whole bunch of strippers and yeah, he had the big Adam beat. That's what they called him down in Hamburg, if you know what I mean, and I think you do.
I do know what you mean. And he was lucky to have survived that horrible ordeal. I don't know how he could have survived, but he did.
Yeah,
And
women can be more dangerous than guns.
I know this is true. He lived long enough to last and have some appearances on the talk show circuits. I do believe he was on the Mike Douglas show once upon a time. Did you ever appear on the Mike Douglas show yourself?
No, but I once stood on top of a TV on which the Mike Douglas show was airing. I think that was an episode that had Tiny Tim and Mason Reese were both on together, and they were discussing Ptolemy's philosophy about whether the sounds of two clapping trees can be heard when one has no soul in November.
Because nothing says television ratings quite like conversations about that particular subject, my friend. And excellent stuff. Well, so that's what's happening here with the Home Run Derby. Everybody be sure to tune in. This is going to be very exciting. It's going to be Monday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time at T-Mobile Park in Seattle. And that's funny. They've got a T-Mobile Park in Seattle, and we have T-Mobile Arena here in Las Vegas. I wonder if they do any profit sharing. Also in Major League Baseball news, it's worth mentioning that the AAA ball club, the Las Vegas Aviators, who are the AAA affiliate for the Oakland Athletics, they just recently sold out their 11th game this season. 10,554 fans were in attendance for a recent home game where the temperature outside was 114 degrees. Now, this is a normal occurrence for this time of year. It does get pretty warm around here, it's true. But some folks are going on to say that because the Aviators are selling out these games, it sort of proves the point that the Oakland A's, when they do make their move to Las Vegas, they might even be able to make the move sooner and perhaps even use the Las Vegas ballpark where the Aviators play somehow, I guess, play games there until their new stadium is ready on the Strip in Vegas. They're going to demolish the Excalibur Hotel and all of the surrounding properties there to erect this brand new stadium for the Oakland Age, which is going to be a dome, probably a retractable dome. I do not know if they've made a final decision with regards to that yet, but people are talking, my friend. People are talking about if the Aviators can sell out ball games in 114-degree heat. This is an outdoor ballpark. The Aviators do not play in a dome. Well, it just goes to show that fans will come out and support baseball here in this town of Las Vegas. And Ringo Klecko, I've got to ask, what do you make of all that?
But playing without a roof in 115-degree heat. Um, Sometimes your baseball games, they go past the 9 innings into extra innings. They can go all night, even with a ghost runner. Yeah, you got to have the stamina, you've got to have the determination, and you've got to have the hydration to be able to get through those things. And I think having relations and consorting with multiple strippers in the morning as you're having your breakfast is the best way to prepare for an Aviators game when you know it's going to be a hot day. We used to play 2 times a day touring the United States, 65 and 66. Everyone knows about the Shea Stadium and Candlestick Park, big baseball stadium concerts, but most of the time we were playing in some fairgrounds, and it was hot, man. I can tell you that. So I can understand how if you're getting, and we used to sell them out, but even when they were protesting us and burning our records. So I think maybe if the Aviators got some kind of scandal, they'd have standing room only instead. In addition to the 11,500, the 11,500 sounds like 11,500 more than they're getting at Oakland for the Oakland A's. So that sounds really good. And of course, in Vegas, there are strippers.
This is true. And speaking of strippers, don't forget, coming up later in this episode, we're going to be touching upon the NHL news. And please remember that Larry Front's Hustler Club has agreed to give the Las Vegas Golden Knights players free lap dances for life. And I wonder how that's working out for them. I should go and check in with them at some point soon and give you the full report afterwards, Ringo Klecko. How does that sound?
That sounds really good. And I think that this was foreshadowed. Obviously, years ago, there was the big scandal. I think it was at the Gold Club, the Gold Strip Club down in Atlanta. Maybe it was Tampa, but I think it was Atlanta, where they got in all sorts of trouble with Patrick Ewing and a whole bunch of New York Knicks
Oh
there.
yes. Oh yes.
Yeah, and so it makes sense that the Golden Knights will be getting it on with the strippers now that they've won the Stanley Cup.
Hmm. Well, one can only hope for the best. And well, that wraps up our MLB segment here on episode 5. And now that brings us to listener mail. Yes, indeed, folks, it's time to dive right into the mailbag and see what sorts of fun emails we've been receiving this time around. Now, we've got a whole bunch of mail coming in, and that reminds me, I should take a moment to mention anytime you have letters or emails or questions or comments, please go ahead and send them in to us at sunnycalzone@gmail.com. That's right. You'll be sending your emails to Sunny Calzone. He's our program director here at the show, and he'll make sure that we receive your mail, and we'll make sure that we take a look at your mail, and then we'll make sure to decide whether or not to read your mail aloud and respond to it on the show. The only way you'll have a chance for us to do that, by the way, is if you send us in your mail. So once again, send all emails to sunnycalzone@gmail.com. Please include Ringo Klecko Sports Report in the subject line of your email, and remember to just go right ahead and shoot your question to us in the body of the message of your email. Okay, we've got two wonderful emails that we're going to take a look at today. The first one came in from Jack Vanderyacht of Hollywood, California. And Jack's got a question about Hal Steinbrenner. That's very interesting. Let's just take a fast look at this other letter that we've got here also. This one comes from Yao Ming in Beijing, China. Interesting. Former NBA player Yao Ming, I guess. He's asking a question that involves the NBA, although it doesn't seem to be NBA centric. It does involve the Boston Celtics, but it also involves Billy Crystal and it involves Chuck Connors. And okay, so we're going to get to Yao Ming's letter in just a moment, but first we're going to circle right back around to the top to Jack Vanderyak from Hollywood, California, who writes in the following letter. Is Hal Steinbrenner a robot? Question mark. If yes, how many more years can the existing electrical grid sustain us? Hmm. Okay, now that's a very good question, Jack. Let me see. How many more years can the existing electrical grid sustain us? Hmm. My guess is going to be 11. But of course, now this all depends on whether or not Hal Steinbrenner is a robot. What do you say, Ringo Klecko?
Obviously, Ringo is known all through Liverpool as being a metronome. He could keep any beat, any kind of style of music. Although back in the early days, all the Liverpool bands all played kind of Chet Atkins and Scotty Moore and all sorts of things, DJ Fontana type of music. But Ringo was known as keeping the beat. You couldn't beat him down. But to be robotic, well, that was the enemy of pulling birds in the dance hall. So you didn't want to just a robotic type of thing. So this Hal Steinbrenner, if he's in fact a robot, well, that would indicate that he's monotonous and that he's kind of dull and boring and really doesn't have much of a personality and really doesn't dress too flashy. Maybe kind of an old suit kind of thing. Like he just came out and was like having his income taxes done, and he just got off of work, and now he's running the Yankees. Yeah, so I don't know much about this Hal Steinbrenner person, but if he's anything like that, then I would think that he is a robot. And as far as how much in the United States electrical grid sustain it, how long can it do? Well, the Yankees haven't won the World Series since 2009. They haven't been in the World Series since 2009. That'll be 14 years. So that would indicate that time's running out, both for Hal Steinbrenner if you're going to get this done. So I would say 14, and then you figure that they've won 27 World Championships. So 14 from 27, that's 13. And then they've had 16 retired numbers. So that's down to the integral of L and X is X on X minus X plus C. But then you do all the different kind of time beats that we did in Good Morning, Good Morning. So I would say that my answer is 16 years.
16 years? Okay. Well, that's a bit more generous. I think my guess was 11, but we'll have to see how it all shakes out. And, with regards to Hal Steinbrenner, of course, I know the Yankees haven't been to a World Series since 2009, but do you suppose if they actually had a healthy Aaron Judge that they might stand a chance of doing just that this year?
Well, I think the question really is, if Paul had played base on she said instead of George, would Aaron Judge have sustained the injury that he did running into the outfield piece of granite stone at Dodger Stadium? And was it the Tommy Lasorda family who installed that stone when they announced the Tommy Lasorda pasta sauce back in 1987, the same year that Aaron Judge was born? I think that to indicate that they would have him injured there, and that would make it more difficult for the Yankees to win the World Series.
I see. Well, it certainly seems to be leveling the playing field a bit. And, well, interesting stuff there. Jack Vanderyak of Hollywood, California. I thank you very much for writing in your letter. I hope that we were able to answer your question.
What
Um,
was the Billy Crystal part?
well, it's time now for our next letter, which involves Billy Crystal.
Oh,
And
got it. Thank
this letter comes from Yao Ming of Beijing, China. That's a long way from here. And Yao Ming writes, if Chuck Connors did so well playing for the Celtics, why the hell did he put up with Billy Crystal's bullshit? I think Chuck Connors put up with Billy Crystal's bullshit in much the same way that George Carlin put up with his bullshit. He put up with it, but the first chance he got, he would then go behind Billy's back and let the world know about it, right? Just like George Carlin did in his autobiography, Last Words. Am I right, Ringo Klecko, or am I right?
you are right, and if you want to look at it from another viewpoint, you're right. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like we had with Mr. Epstein when he sold out 90% of Seal Team, which is Beatles spelled backwards. That was the merchandising licensing agreement for North America that Mr. Epstein signed 99.9% away without even telling us. We consider that to be, you know, kind of like a Billy Crystal kind of move. And so what we did was, well, we never find out until 1967 after he had gone. But, we didn't know anything about that. All we knew is that when you have a 5'4", balding, hair implanted, Borscht Belt comedian who's winning Oscars, hosting the Oscars, and, basically being the comedy arbiter of what's funny and what's not funny. That's kind of like Billy J. Kramer and the Dakotas. They couldn't come out and say that the Beatles couldn't get the best birds, and that's kind of like Billy Crystal saying that, wait, George Carlin, you have to wait until I get all the strippers in Vegas, even before the Vegas Golden Knights, and then maybe you'll get your turn. It doesn't wash in here, there, or everywhere.
You are absolutely right, Ringo Klecko, and there is no disputing that. Yao Ming of Beijing, China, I hope that we were able to successfully answer your question. And just as a footnote, no one should have to put up with Billy Crystal's bullshit. And let's see, no one should also have to put up with a lack of reruns of The Rifleman readily available on streaming. They make
And
you
me
have to hunt
TV.
for it. Yes, yes, I know METV, but it should be more readily available, is my point. All right, so now then, that takes us out from our listener mail segment and boom, right into NBA. How about that? So, speaking of the Celtics and Chuck Connors and his time with that team, it's now time to take a look at what's happening in the National Basketball Association. Well, CBSSports.com just recently put up an article that says NBA free agency grades. Heat, Suns, Cavs, and Pacers earned top marks, while the Bulls and the Raptors lag behind. Four teams earned an A grade for free agency. Pretty good. But let's take a look and see what some of the other teams earned. Well, there is a team that plays in Atlanta. The team's called the Hawks. And this article says Atlanta has been relatively quiet on the free agent front, but they've made a few clever trades in the post-draft period, getting off the ugly John Collins contract without taking on long-term money is a major win. Not only does it save the Hawks money, but it opens up more playing time for others. Right, so the Atlanta Hawks get a B plus, and then the Brooklyn Nets, they get a grade of a B. The Nets had two primary goals coming into free agency: duck the luxury tax and retain Cam Johnson. They have now seemingly done both. They pawned Joe Harris off on Detroit to clear the money needed to retain Johnson below the cap line. And while their shooting surplus is now gone, with Seth Curry in Dallas, the Nets have kept all of the most important players from last season's blockbusters. Right, very interesting. Moving right on down the list. Who gets an A? Well, the Cleveland Cavaliers. Their goal was to come away with one viable wing to pair with their two-star guards and their two-star bigs. They ultimately landed two of them. Neither George Niang or Max Strus are especially strong defenders, but both will work wonders on an offense that took the seventh fewest three-pointers in the NBA last season. And all right, very good. Denver Nuggets, ooh, they get the grade of a D. That's D as in Debbie Downer. There was nothing the Denver Nuggets could have done to keep Bruce Brown. Even if they dumped Kentavious Caldwell Pope to open up the non-taxpayer mid-level exception, they still would have come $10 million short annually compared to where Indiana ultimately landed. Now, the Nuggets can't be blamed for losing Brown. It was a collective bargaining agreement reality, but everything else, that's on Denver. Interestingly enough, it also goes on to give the Golden State Warriors a grade of a C plus. Once the Warriors traded Jordan Poole, it became clear that they had one major priority this offseason: find a way to retain Draymond Green. They not only did so, but they brought him back at a salary roughly 5.3 million below his initial player option. And so with luxury taxes factored in, this will save the Warriors an estimated $43 million. It's pretty savvy. What do you make of all this free agency stuff that's going on here, Ringo Klecko?
Well, what comes to mind, mate, is Atlanta's problems in ridding themselves of the ugly John Collins contract. It's quite well known that we had to deal with the ugly Phil Collins contract when he appeared in a minor role in A Hard Day's Night in the
He was under
final concert
contract?
scene. Well, yeah, I mean, he was under contract, but not with us directly, but apparently from the Rolling Stones. Andrew Lou Oldham had contracted this. We thought he was 4 years old, but apparently he was 14 because he was only about 3'10", to go ahead and cause trouble and ruckus on the set of our movie.
Oh,
Yeah, this Phil Collins, there certainly was ugly. We didn't find anything not ugly about him, and we can only all we can say is the only silver lining is that when the Atlanta Hawks called us and said, "Well, how do we get out of this ugly John Collins contract?" We said, "Well, just watch a Hard Day's Night, focus in on the concert scene, and you'll know exactly what you do with an ugly Collins."
and know what you're doing. Very good. Well, I make the same of it myself too. Now, before we jump into the NHL stuff, it is important since we mentioned Max Strus earlier, and now he's a member of the Cleveland Cavaliers. What's going to become of the Miami Heat now that they've started to break apart that team around Jimmy Butler? Well, this CBSSports.com article goes on to say that with regards to the Miami Heat, first of all, they're giving them the grade of an A. The free agency period has been relatively standard Heat fare. Vincent and Max Strus both took the typical Heat free agent path from unheralded prospect to rich deals with other teams. That rarely bothers Miami because the Heat are so good at developing replacements. They won't be graded on their up-and-coming G-Leaguers, but bringing back Josh Richardson, the player good enough to be traded for Jimmy Butler in 2019, was an incredible bit of business. Thomas Bryant struggled in Denver, but thrives offensively when paired with playmakers on the perimeter. Dumping Victor Oladipo will help out with their luxury tax situation. And most importantly, Damian Lillard of the Portland Trailblazers has finally made it clear that he wants to join the Miami Heat. Interesting stuff there. What do you think about that Miami Heat stuff going on, Ringo Klecko?
You mentioned Thomas Bryant and the Miami Heat and all of that. There, obviously, it was Cubby Bryant, who was the drummer from the Mickey Mouse Club. He was the Mouseketeer. He was
He
always rocking
was.
around bunch of sticks. Yeah, most normal, healthy Englishmen of the day, they were looking at a net full of cello, but apparently they figured, well, we got to get this cubby guy who can play the sticks too. And happily, when the Beatles were looking for a new drummer to replace Pete Best, that Cubby Bryant was not available as he was with a stripper on the strip with the Vegas Golden Knights down at Larry Flint's Hustler Club. That could have changed the course of music history forever.
It could have. And it's also worth mentioning that Polar Bear Pete was unable to replace either because he had not even been born yet.
Yeah,
And
that normally wouldn't stop him. He's a very dedicated, tenacious, professional baseball player and all around human being. But the fact that he wasn't even born yet, he said, "Well, you know what? I don't like it, but I'm gonna have to wait on the bench until it's my turn."
we can't hold it against the guy, can we? Well, I suppose we can, but we probably shouldn't.
Well,
And all right.
I'm too filled with rage against him to even express how much I hold it against him.
Well, then in that case, I think we better slide right on into what's happening in the NHL. All right. ESPN.com just threw up an article that says 2023 NHL free agency tracker, signings, analysis, grades. Okay, so here we go again. Um, we are well into the NHL free agency period, and let's take a look and see what's going on with the grades, okay? And because of course, not every team is going to be a winner. Not every team is going to be a loser. And but well, let's just take a look here at one team here. The Toronto Maple Leafs. What's going on with them? Well, they just signed Tyler Bertuzzi, 1 year, 5.5 million. And it also goes on to say, well, where does he fit with the Maple Leafs? Well, Michael Bunting played 74 games and 736 minutes with Austin Matthews at 5-on-5. Together, they generated 4 goals for every 60 minutes of even strength play. In 2 years playing primarily with Matthews, Bunting had 46 goals and 66 points in 161 games with the Leafs. Bunting parlayed that success into a 3-year free agent deal with the Carolina Hurricanes on Saturday that was worth $4.5 million annually against the salary cap. And so all of this means now that Austin Matthews needs a new winger. This means Tyler Bertuzzi could be a very, very lucky player. Bertuzzi, age 28, has become known for two things in his NHL career. Number one, a grinding, agitating style of play. And number two, being a playmaking winger. Anyone who saw his brief time with David Pastrnak and the Boston Bruins knows what kind of a setup man Bertuzzi can be while playing with high-end talent. So whether it's Matthews and William Nylander or John Tavares and Mitchell Marner, Bertuzzi will get that chance again in Toronto. What do you make of all that, Ringo Klecko?
Well, obviously, Maple Leafs Gardens is one of the places where the Beatles played when they toured North America. Obviously, the menus and the newspapers were a lot easier to read for the Fab Four from Liverpool because they spelled words like defense with the C at the end as opposed to the S, which down in the lower 48 states, that's really confusing, especially for Ringo when he would order small bread because everything, they had a touchy stomach and everything like that. But yeah, I know that when we recorded the White Album, that we were all hoping that Olympic gold medalist Peggy Fleming would come in and draw up some plays with us diagram. And I always felt I could be a stay-at-home defenseman. That I'd really leave it to John and Paul, not so much George, because he was off for this CETA. It could be the offensive defenseman again, spelled with an O, to score the goals. But I'd be just doing the backbeat, stay at home and make sure that no one got past us, no kind of, problems that might come up a couple of days later. You might need a shot of penicillin for. We thought that Miss Fleming would be classy broad, classy bird, and everything else like that. But she knew how to handle a stick. I'll tell you that much.
Hmm. And taking a look at some of the other teams around the league here, we've got the Detroit Red Wings. Now, this ESPN.com article goes on to say that here's what the Detroit Red Wings should do. It says that they have two clear areas of need. Scoring depth is the first one, and they're going to need a suitable number two player to play behind Ville Husso in the net. Detroit finished 24th in goals per game last season, so that would have been 2.89. And trading away Tyler Bertuzzi certainly didn't help there, so it's time to restock. Now, the free agent market up front is veteran heavy, and General Manager Steve Yzerman has already explored the trade route, adding Kailer Yamamoto and RFA Klim Kostin in a transaction with the Edmonton Oilers on Thursday of last week. Pending Ottawa Senators, Alex DeBrincat is another option on that front. Now, the Red Wings just can't go another year without addressing their offensive inconsistencies. They just can't. As for the goaltending dilemma, it's time to give Husso a real partner, even if it's a Cam Talbot or if it's a Semyon Marmelov, maybe could do the trick, leaving Husso to shine as Detroit's number one while providing the right amount of support. And well, what do you think about Husso there in Detroit there, Ringo Klecko?
Think that it's the problem with scoring depth is something that being in a big rock and roll band, being in the biggest band in the world, and touring all around the world, and getting off stage when you need a little functions to help her with the relaxation to come down and everything else like that. The one thing that you don't want to have to search for is scoring depth. You figure that Mal Evans and everyone, all the roadies on the road there, that they would have vetted out everybody to make sure that we'd get the scoring depth that we need. I mean, if we're going to score, we need the depth to score. But if there's no depth there, then we're not getting the relaxation and the relief that we need, and we really feel we're entitled to after rocking and rolling all across the United States. So yeah, we could definitely relate to the Detroit Red Wings, because if they're not getting their scoring depth, then they're just not scoring.
Hmm. You're right. And it comes down to cap space too. It's nice when you have cap space. For instance, the New York Islanders right now, they're sitting at a nice $10,336,000 cap space. That's not bad. Some teams don't even have $1 million in cap space right now. And this ESPN.com article also goes on to say here regarding the New York Islanders, here's what they should do during free agency this season. Like their neighbors in New Jersey, the Islanders' focus and their cash flow should be on those already in the fold. They've got two unrestricted free agents, Scott Mayfield, defenseman, Semyon Varlamov, goalie, and they've got one restricted free agent, forward Oliver Wahlstrom. Now, this article also goes on to say here that the general manager, Lou Lamoriello, made a first step in the right direction when he moved Josh Bailey's contract off the books in Thursday's deal with Chicago to create $5 million in cap space. Nice move. The Islanders have other priorities to manage now. Forwarder Oliver Wahlstrom projects as an important piece of New York's future at age 23. Would he accept a shorter deal now that allows the Islanders to conserve some cap space? They'll need that space to sign veteran Scott Mayfield and preserve the club's defensive depth moving forward. So next, it's all about the goaltending and whether there's money to spare for Varlamov. Given the sparse free agent market this year, Varlamov could be a hot commodity and price the Islanders out of a new deal. In that case, New York would be targeting someone else to back up Ilya Sorokin on a more cost-effective deal. Alex Nedeljovic, for example, could be looking for a fresh start, and he has been an effective player in the past. The opportunity to sign Nedeljovic or someone similar to a team-friendly deal in which they're supporting Sorokin might work for both parties. Both parties. What do you make of it, Ringo Klecko?
Yeah, well, you got to have everyone satisfied, but at the same time, you got to have everyone understand the budgetary constraints. If you're front loading all of your budget and your cap space to just a handful of players like Mr. Bailey's now in Chicago, then you really can't have enough money to get all the supplementary players that you need to be a high powered machine. I think it goes back to, for by way of example, when Mr. Pete Shotton, John Lennon's best friend back from Form 3 back in Bank Grammar School, he contributed a couple of lines to Strawberry Fields Forever. But John and Paul weren't going to break up the partnership and all that, make it John Lennon McCartney Shotton. So what John did is he bought Pete Shotton a line of supermarkets on in the north of England, and he became an incredibly wealthy individual his own right from that. So yeah, I think that in the same way that all the goalie that you mentioned. And then everybody else, they've got to get on contract with Lou Lamoriello, and then they've really got to, they got to shoot the puck at the net if they're going to score a goal.
That's right. You can't be scoring goals if you shoot the puck at the crowd or at any other target for that matter. Although you can please a crowd by occasionally shooting the puck at the nether regions of an opposing player. Um, but of course, that's really only especially nice when it's their own idea. Now, just looking at a couple of the other teams here in this article, it goes on to mention that the Pittsburgh Penguins actually have cap space exceeding 15 million, and they just made a nice deal for Stanley Cup champ Riley Smith coming over from the Vegas Golden Knights. If I'm not mistaken, they got Riley Smith for just a third round pick. That's it, straight up, which was totally a cost-cutting move for Vegas. Of course, now that they've just won the Stanley Cup, uh, well, I say they, but I really mean we, especially since I live here these days. Now, of course, we're going to have to face the hard reality of being able to sign everybody that just won the cup. And the truth is, you can't bring everybody back. But
Did
it
they
was,
get Riley Stripper in that deal too?
well, they got Riley Smith was one of the original Vegas Golden Knights. I think there were only two remaining before Riley's departure. So now it looks like there's only one left back over there. But the cap space is at 15,000, I'm sorry, 15,208,158. And I take it that includes already the Riley Smith signing as well. I guess, but this ESPN.com article does say here that Pittsburgh's new president of hockey operations, Kyle Dubas, has a long to-do list. First on Dubas's agenda should be addressing the Penguins' goaltending and whether pending unrestricted free agent Tristan Jarry is a part of the club's future. And Jarry has been hampered by injuries in recent years, but he could still receive lucrative offers on the open market given the lean free agent group. If Jarry isn't the answer for Pittsburgh in net, who is? Good question. After making a decision on Jarry, there's defenseman Brian Dumoulin and forward Jason Zucker to either re-sign or replace. Both players are 31, and this might be their last chance to cash in on a long-term deal somewhere. The team's trade for Stanley Cup champ Riley Smith could be a hint as to Zucker's future in particular. The Penguins' window to compete for a championship with Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, and Chris Letang is rapidly closing. How Dubas handles this offseason, doling out shorter-term contracts to known commodities or looking elsewhere for new ones, could say plenty about the direction in which Pittsburgh is headed. What do you think about all this Pittsburgh stuff there, Ringo Klecko?
Well, the Pittsburgh Penguins, they have a history of going outside of the organization to get good goaltending. Obviously, they got Tom Barrasso from the Buffalo Sabres, and which led to their back-to-back Stanley Cup championships. So I think that they're not going to be limited. I know the Erie Otters, they're probably what you would call the Vegas Aviators of the Pittsburgh Penguins organization. I think they get about not 11,500. I think they get 11 fans because that's as much as the Erie Otters arena holds. But they are sold out every game, so that might be a good indication that the Oakland A's, after they make their stop in Vegas for 20, 30, 40 years, that they'll be moving to Erie, Pennsylvania next.
That may very well be a strong indicator of that. Well, I want to thank you all for taking this time to enjoy episode 5 of the Ringo Klecko Sports Report with us here. And we will see you here with us next time. Signing off, my name is Timothy Connolly, and here's Ringo Klecko. And Ringo, please, some pearls of wisdom for our viewers and listeners out there, please, if you would.
Rock and roll, everybody, all the time, everywhere.
Well, now that's the best advice anyone could give anyone else. Thank you, Ringo Klecko. I'll see you next time.